My motivation for writing it now is that I think there's no question that this obsession with trans that comes from the right, that comes from Republicans, that come from MAGA, is really the overreaction to it, is really an attempt uh, to deal with the fact that the party never actually accepted same-sex marriage. We just sort of shut up about it because it was losing votes.
Yeah.
So this is sort of one of these instances, I think, of sort of an angry clawback at that. Um, and it's just so hypocritical,
Yeah.
given what you and I and so many others know about the Republican Party.
So gay. I mean, all kidding aside, it's like, how many campaigns were you and I both on where the absolute like core group of the campaign were closeted gay Republican men,
Yeah,
and where they,
listen,
including up to and including the candidates many times.
yeah. And it seemed to be the more conservative the candidate, the more likely they were to be gay.
That was a
Um,
great line our friend Reed Galen used to use about about the first Bush or the first W White House. It's like is so and so gay, and the answer would be no, he's not conservative enough.
exactly. And for me, and I talk about this in this piece, I was a page in Washington,
Mhm.
um, and the guy who ran the office, which we used to call these people AAs,
Right.
administrative assistants. And then I think that what happened was they realized when they went out to K Street to make a lot of money as lobbyists, when they had AAs on their resume,
Right.
it didn't
Title
exactly
inflation.
translate as the same thing. So then we started calling him chief of staff. Okay, so
Right.
chief of staff was this guy named John Hinson, who was this very smart, funny country boy from Tylertown, Mississippi,
Hmm.
which if you ask anybody, Mississippi about Tylertown, they'll say it's never really been the same since the Haskell factory closed. So that's Tylertown. Um,
Right.
his dad is a Democratic supervisor, which is a powerful position in those rural counties. Um, and John was a guy who had also been a page, who had spent his entire working life in Washington and had a
Right.
reverence for Congress, the process of government, that was very moving. I talk about walking around with him in the first week. Came up there as a page. He was very nice, took me and others around. And it was sort of like having a tour of the Sistine Chapel or something, or the Vatican by
Sure.
a
Sure.
cardinal, the way he talked about it.
Hmm.
Um, and I had no idea that John I think he was bisexual. Um, but in retrospect, we spent a couple of weekends, asked me, if I wanted to go out to this beach house that he and some other guys rented in Rehoboth, did. I think in retrospect, they were all gay. They were a lot like John. They worked on the Hill,
Sure.
great, great gossips. And for these people, guys like John, Washington wasn't this uh, rural swamp that so many like to say, this small town. What was it Kennedy
No.
said? It had southern efficiency and northern
Northern
charm.
charm.
Um, it was a place that, you had the Arena Stage, you had the Kennedy Center, you had a whole section of gay bars. So much so they call it the Gay Way. There was that whole group, sort of whirled by the Marine Corps barracks, which I don't know
Right
if
before
that's
Navy Yard became like Gen Z hangout, it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the Navy Yard barracks row, as they called it, became that because it is near the Marine Corps barracks,
Oh yeah.
where a few good men hang out, or if it's just sort of accidental. Um, I was a page, and then years later, I was in film school at UCLA, which, just for the record, is a ridiculous thing to do. Don't ever do it. It's absurd. It's the academization of something that you should just go apprentice.
Just go learn it.
Yeah, it's like getting MFA in plumbing. No, you don't need to do that. Um, and John called me up kind of out of the blue, and we stayed in touch, sort of. Said he was going to run for Congress because the congressman that he was working for then, who was my congressman, a guy named Thad Cochran, was
Right.
running for the U.S. Senate. So John was going to run for his seat, which was a very common thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the great uh, Ward Just wrote a novel
Oh
based
yeah.
upon that premise called Honor, Fame, Riches, and the Love of Women, about a guy who worked for a congressman, was married to the congressman's daughter, and then ran for his seat. Um, but he was expected to lose because he was running against the son of the very powerful Senator John Hampton Stennis.
Yep.
He didn't have any money, didn't have any organization, he'd never run for office before. He said, "Look, you've got to make commercials for him." I said, "John, like, that's great, man, but like, I don't know how to make commercials. I just make these stupid little films." Um, and he said, "No, you got to do it." So I did. I went back to Mississippi. Um, and John won. Now, he won because he was the right guy in the right place.
Sure.
Um, as is often the case, when a congressman runs statewide, that congressman way overperforms in the district. So Thad Cochran got a
Right.
huge vote in his district that propelled John Hinson to win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cut to summer of 2 years later, when he's running, getting ready to run for re-election for the first time. He called me up. I remember it so well. I was in Vermont, where I was getting a master's at Middlebury in English. He tracked me down to a miners muffler shop and said, "You know, there's something I should have told you."
Uh-oh.
And as you know, Rick,
Anytime you hear those words, it's like we left something out of the Oppo file.
yeah,
What?
whatever follows is not going to be,
No, it's
"I
not.
actually have $1 billion I can put into the campaign. I forgot to mention it."
Yeah,
You
rarely.
know, and he explained to me how he had been, when he was working for Thad Cochran as a chief of staff, he had been arrested at the Iwo Jima Memorial for indecent exposure. Apparently, Iwo Jima Memorial was a gay hangout. Um, and he had been in a fire in the Cinema Follies Theater, which was a gay theater when Southeast,
Yep.
instead of being this Gen Z hangout, was a seedy sort of part of Washington. He had walked over there in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, and was caught in a fire in the theater
Right.
and had been the sole survivor. This horrific
Jesus.
experience. Um, and he believed that now the Democrats knew about this, which turned out not to be true. They had no idea. Um,
Right.
and, what do I do about it? And my instinct was, I think, pretty much obvious, you got to just go talk about it.
Sure.
So John held his press conference. He had, after getting elected, he'd married his longtime girlfriend, who was this Georgia beauty queen,
Of
wonderful
course.
person. And the Mississippi Republican establishment stood by him, which was interesting. Trent Lott was an up
Oh,
and
yeah.
coming star as a congressman. He and John had been both working for congressmen from Mississippi at the same time. So they had this bond. The big donors stayed with him. I remember this scene where sort of looked like one of these scenes you see in the Oval Office now, where these creepy scenes with the laying on of hands. There was a
Right.
prayer that, praying for John to have strength and uh, asking forgiveness. And, as I say, this piece, I've heard a lot of prayers. The first one I ever heard, the only one I ever heard that, like, "Forgive me, God, for being gay so I can win the next race." Um, but
you
God
know,
was listening
apparently
because
so.
John won. And then he gets inaugurated his second term, and not long after, he was busted in the sixth floor bathroom of the Longworth building, when the Longworth
Gary
building then
Studs, right?
was
Yep.
mostly storage rooms. Apparently, that was a gay assignation spot, and the Capitol cops set up some kind of surveillance sting or something. I'm not
Oh
sure.
Lord.
And they arrested a number of people, including John, and including a congressman from Massachusetts, Gary Studs. Uh, they called Tip O'Neill. What do we do with Studs? He protected him. Um, they called Trent Lott, supposedly. I haven't ever gotten this confirmed by Trent, and it was, do what you have to do.
Right.
They felt like they'd given John another chance, and so John resigned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and shortly thereafter, I got a call from the famous Arthur J. Finkelstein.
Oh yes, we both worked with Arthur over the
who
years.
you worked with, asked you if I wanted to work with them. How would you describe Arthur?
When I say that he was flamboyant and exotic, I don't mean in the gay way. I don't mean in the stereotypical way. But folks, Arthur always wore a necktie but never tied it, and it was down to about the loop was around there. I never saw him wear shoes, not even like walking out to his car. Like I was, does he wear shoes? Is he a fucking hobbit? What is this? But Arthur was a guy who was one of the architects, and this is why this story is really important, y'all, and why this I think this series from Stu is important. Arthur Finkelstein, in a very meaningful way, invented the modern Republican culture war. If you go back to watch Arthur's ads in 80, 82, 84, 86, 88, 90, and 92, and then after 92, he started drifting into like foreign work mostly. He did a lot of work in Israel and other stuff. But if you look at that arc of Arthur's work, he invented the culture war. He was a gay Republican who moved to Massachusetts so he and his partner could adopt a child, but he would do ads that were like, the gays are in your schools coming to get you. If you look at the trans ads of today, they are the spiritual descendants of Arthur Finkelstein's work. And this is why this is fascinating, because there is and you absolutely hit it, Stuart. There's a resentment culture inside the Republican Party in the evangelical Christian right. They never got over gay marriage. One of my favorite, of my Republican gay stories was back in, I think it was 2012 or 13, I don't know, maybe 14, I can't remember now, before Trump. I had a memo that went out to my clients, and I was like, because I had been pro-gay marriage since like 08 or 06, way in advance of everybody else, because I was just like, I'm a damn libertarian Republican. And what world is it the business of the party to tell people who can get married for
Right.
competent adults? Well, Rush Limbaugh got a copy of this memo of mine. And he goes on the air and it's like, degenerate Rick Wilson is a sick pervert because he thinks that the gays should get married. I'm like, motherfucker, you are the most degenerate, whoremongering, Viagra smuggling, hooker using weirdo motherfucker to roam Palm Beach, Florida in the history of Palm Beach, Florida. And that is a high bar.
That's a high bar.
That is a high bar. But it was just shocking to me how viscerally, and that wasn't an A-tier issue at that moment. You know, Obamacare or whatever was a much bigger fight. But the triggering of that among Republican hardcores was amazing to me. One of my critics during that time, Matt Schlapp. Matt Schlapp, guys from CPAC, just Google it. You'll discover that Matt, although he has a wife and children, Mercedes Schlapp lacks the one thing apparently that Matt really loves, and that's a penis. So all of his bullshit, all this fake anger at people about trans issues and gay issues, it is part of a much longer, weirder thing embedded in the GOP, a self-hatred that is, and look, believe me, Stuart and I have had experiences with people, including people we worked with very recently in the last 5 years, who tried to keep it a secret. Y'all, it never stays a secret forever. It never does. And in this day and age, it never stays a secret. So, Stuart, I just really loved the piece. It was lyrical and I mean, and sad about some of the lives these people had that they couldn't be honest with themselves about who they were. And I think in a large way, it reflects that the party can't be honest with itself what it is.
Yeah, at the time I was bouncing back and forth, working some on television shows, writing for television shows. And there is no question that, as far as I knew, I worked with a lot more gay men in Republican politics than I did in television.
Right.
by far.
By far.
And, there was that so-called Log Cabin Republican Club, which was a gay Republican group.
Yeah.
To their credit,
God bless.
God love them. I don't ever
Yeah.
really think they had much oomph. Um, but then I thought it was just so sad and telling. They ended up endorsing Trump in 2016.
Right.
And a friend of mine was on their board who couldn't believe it, voted against it. And, asked her why. She said, well, they promised him really good rooms at the convention. It's like, that's
There you
that's what
go.
it's come to. Um,
Well, and look, I think it's going to be interesting to see how many gay Republicans in the House and the Senate are going to vote against gay marriage because the Supreme Court excuse me, the Federal Society is angling to get a anti-gay marriage case in front of the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell. They're desperate to do that,
yeah,
and I'm fascinated to see how a lot of these closeted Republicans in the Senate, um, some are married even, and the House are going to vote on this. It is going to be one more example that the weirdness of their ideology collides with like a foundation of their own human nature. And it's like I said, I thought it was a great article, Stuart. I mean, I find myself sad for those people that they just
yeah, it's
can't be
very
honest
sad.
about who they are.
Yeah, you remember that guy who was the arch conservative in the House from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Bob Bauman,
Oh yeah.
who, a little sort of bullet of a guy, always wore three-piece suits,
Mm-hmm.
a true, angry cultural warrior
Oh yeah.
who ended up getting caught on 14th Street with a male page. And he had this
Oh,
cheerful moment where he went in front of the house and tried to blame it because he was drunk, in which Steny Howard, is that how you pronounce it,
yeah.
Howard? I
Hoyer.
think in his
Hoyer.
finest moment, probably, the Democratic congressman,
Yeah.
prominent from Maryland, went down to the floor of the house and said, Bob, that works great, except the rest of us have been drunk too, and we didn't end up on 14th Street with the page. So the
Oh my
cause and
God.
effect.
Oh my
Um,
God. Well,
it just seemed to be, again, the more you were obsessed with this stuff, the
yeah.
more likely the odds were that you were gay. And that's what I'm going to talk about in these other pieces,
Yeah.
and go through some more of the history of it, which is playing out now
Well,
in very sad, hurtful, painful
yeah.
ways, um, that is having tremendous impact on people across the country. So
I
hope,
think, and I think before we wrap up, I mean, every week I see a damn story that has, just like the guy this week in Minnesota. He's out there
right.
doing a bill to declare Trump derangement syndrome a mental illness, while simultaneously he is engaged with what he thinks is a teenage prostitute who's underage and gets arrested for it. We see people posting AI pictures of Democratic leaders with Jeffrey Epstein when Donald Trump really was with Jeffrey Epstein. We see that all the time. And yet then these are the same people that are getting picked up for child porn and child rape and all this weird. Folks, just Google Republican sexual predators at some point. It's don't do it on a weekend. Do it during a weekday when you need something to do. It's both hilarious and tragic and sad because there's something really broken inside the party Stuart and I used to represent. And I don't know, Stuart, I don't know about you, but whenever I worked with gay Republicans, I was like, okay, is he good at his job? Does he do good
Yeah,
direct
yeah, no,
mail? Does he do good
there
phones?
was,
Does he make good ads? Okay, I
yeah,
don't care.
there was so much. I mean, this is certainly true in the Bush campaigns that I worked on. So many gay guys, and it was really I know I didn't even talk about it. And yet, and one of the things I want to get into
Yeah,
in this series is when Bush ran in 2004, he ran supporting a
yeah.
constitutional amendment
That
against
was
gay
Carl. That
marriage,
was Rove's big secret sauce.
which I really, when I look back on it, I think that was our darkest moment. Uh,
Yeah, and I remember that Carl was unhappy when the old bot when Dick Cheney on stage said, "I love my daughter,"
yeah,
and
I'm gonna,
and 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 the culture warriors were like, "How dare?" I'm like, And I said to a reporter that night, I'm like, any of you motherfuckers want to step up to calling Dick Cheney not a conservative? Because I'll have that fight all day long.
You know
And
what? I'm going to get into this, but I did debate prep for
mhm,
Bush and Cheney in
yep,
2000. And
mhm,
one of the things we prepared for was, at the time, the sort of uh, epicenter of this was a same-sex action referendum in Vermont.
right.
And Cheney, if asked directly by Bernard Shaw, who was moderating it, if he
Hmm.
would vote for that, was going to say yes.
I remember.
And Bush was, and apparently when Bush was talking to him about running for vice president, Cheney was very open about this, and Bush is like, "We don't have to agree. That's fine, you know."
Right.
Which, if you know Bush, you can just hear him saying that, like, "Man, I don't care.
I don't care. Whatever.
What the fuck?"
Who gives a shit?
But if you go back and look at this debate, it's fascinating because Shaw asked about same-sex marriage, but he doesn't ask Cheney directly. And Cheney gave a thoughtful answer. And
Yes,
then
he
he
did.
asked Lieberman, and it's so clear Lieberman just never really thought about it
Right.
because he
Right.
just kind of goes off, and it was one of these weird answers that like started at home plate and ended up like, in outer space, and how you get there. Um, but, I was always moved with the way in which uh, Dick Cheney treated his daughter and her partner.
100%.
Um,
And before we wrap up, it's like, in some ways, yes, it had to start. Tolerance of gay marriage had to start for some Republicans with their family members. Both of my sisters are gay. As I used to joke, I won the lesbian lottery. I love them to death. They're both their relationships and marriages have lasted for decades. They're fine and wonderful people. And and at some point, I had a guy, like, during the whole Limbaugh thing, like, "Well, your sisters are gay." I'm like, and your point is what? It's not that they're gay. It's that the people who hate them are all in the party. And I think that's Stuart. I think, like, unfolding this story is going to help people understand why there's a really weird, sort of dark, cancerous thing inside the GOP.
in
Well,
anger.